the family dinner, while laughter echoed and the roast still steamed on porcelain plates, my daughter-in-law leaned over, her lips brushing my ear. "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby, Martha," she whispered, venom sweet as honey. I looked at her, smug, glowing, victorious, and smiled. "Don't worry, dear," I said calmly. "Everything always works out in the end." She didn't know I had already seen the way her fingers brushed the gardener's arm. She didn't know I'd found the hidden statements. And she certainly didn't know this dinner would be the start of her undoing. I've spent 43 years keeping this family together, silently, selflessly. But that ends now. Follow my story and tell me in the comments, if someone tried to erase you from your own family, would you stay silent or would you burn the whole lie down? My name is Martha Ellison. I'm 65 years old, retired after 4 decades of teaching 3rd grade, and I've always believed that the heart of any home is its kitchen. Tonight my hands move by habit. Roast beef in the oven, green beans with almonds, scalloped potatoes bubbling gently. Everything just like Ethan liked it when he was little. Even the table was set with the good china, the one passed down from my grandmother. Our son was coming home for dinner. That used to mean something. And I suppose deep down I wanted it to mean something again. I lit the candles as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting soft gold over the polished mahogany table. Walter, my husband of 43 years, was already sitting in his usual spot at the head, thumbing through the evening paper, but not really reading. Lately, he seemed distant, distracted. Not cruel. Walter had never been cruel, but hollow, like a man who'd wandered too far inside his own mind. I tried to ignore it. Marriage, after all, isn't a constant crescendo of fireworks. Sometimes it's just quiet presence, or so I'd convinced myself. The doorbell rang precisely at 6. Ethan burst in with the same energy he had as a boy, his dark hair tousled by the wind. Behind him, Chloe followed, perfectly put together in a form-fitting ivory sweater dress, heels clicking across the floor. She looked like a magazine ad for The Modern Wife. All cool elegance and curated warmth. She kissed my cheek with that soft touch she always used, just barely there, like affection was an accessory she wore with intention. "Dinner smells amazing, Mom," Ethan said, wrapping me in a hug that still felt sincere. Chloe smiled. "It's like stepping into a holiday card." We sat, past dishes. The conversation flowed easily. Stories from work, mild complaints about the traffic. Walter barely spoke, nodding occasionally, sipping his wine. I noticed Chloe watching him, not like a daughter-in-law admiring her father-in-law, but with calculation. It was subtle. But I'd spent my life reading children's faces, sensing what they weren't saying. Chloe wasn't glowing with maternal joy. She was radiant with power. Halfway through dinner, she dabbed her lips with her napkin and placed it gently beside her plate. "Actually, we have news," she said, reaching for Ethan's hand. He looked surprised for a moment, then smiled as if the pieces suddenly clicked. "Oh, right," he said, laughing softly. "Go on, tell them." Chloe turned to me and Walter, her green eyes glistening. "We're expecting." For a moment, I forgot to breathe. The room burst into joy, Ethan standing to hug her, Walter offering a stiff smile. Even I managed a stunned, "Congratulations." My heart should have been bursting. This should have been the moment I dreamed about. Grandchildren, new beginnings. But something was off. Ethan was glowing with hope. Chloe. She wasn't just pleased, she was triumphant. He poured champagne, toasting to new adventures. Laughter returned to the table. The roast was passed again, but Chloe's eyes never left me. As I raised my glass, she stood and moved behind me. "Let me help you with your napkin," she said sweetly, reaching past my shoulder. Her perfume, something expensive and sharp, flooded my senses. Then her voice, soft and poisonous, curled into my ear. "It's Walter's." The world went still. My fingers clutched the base of the champagne flute. My pulse thundered in my ears. I didn't turn, didn't scream. I smiled, my mouth moving before my brain could catch up. "Don't worry, dear," I said gently. "Everything always works out in the end." She blinked, momentarily startled. That wasn't the reaction she expected. She'd come to war, and I'd offered her tea. That single moment, that flicker of confusion on her flawless face, was the only thing keeping me from breaking. When she returned to her seat, she reached for Ethan's hand again, playing the picture-perfect wife. He beamed, oblivious, drunk on hope. And Walter didn't look at me at all, not once. I tasted nothing for the rest of the meal. I heard words, but they were distant. What echoed in my mind over and over was that whisper. The way she said Walter's name like a secret she cherished, like a weapon she polished. Later, I'd replay this dinner again and again. I'd ask myself when the cracks began. Was it the night Walter came home late without a reason? The day Chloe started dropping by more often? Or was it tonight, in the moment I smiled through the death of everything I thought I knew? But in that moment, I only knew one thing. Something terrible had begun, and I was the only one at the table who knew it. I washed each dish with robotic precision that night, the warm water scalding my skin while my mind swirled with images from dinner. Chloe's whisper played like a cursed lullaby in my ears. "It's Walter's." The words had sliced through the evening like a razor, yet I hadn't flinched, I hadn't screamed, I hadn't even blinked. That, more than anything, seemed to unsettle her. I'd spent a lifetime tempering storms with silence. When Ethan was 5 and broke his arm falling off the treehouse, I didn't cry. I cradled him, comforted him, calmed Walter's panic. When my sister died unexpectedly, I baked 4 dozen casseroles for grieving relatives. Grief and crisis had long ago taught me that silence was often more powerful than outrage. Tonight was no exception. Still, behind the mask I wore, the storm brewed. What struck me most wasn't just Chloe's audacity. It was Walter's lack of reaction. Not a twitch, not a cough, not a single moment of discomfort after she'd announced the pregnancy. He hadn't looked at me all night, not once. If the baby truly wasn't his, shouldn't he have at least met my eyes, even in horror? Guilt? Denial? Instead, he carved his meat like we were strangers dining across a cafeteria table. That silence screamed louder than Chloe's whisper. I dried the last wine glass and thought back over the past 6 months. The signs had been there. Subtle. Easy to overlook when you're busy folding laundry and scheduling dental appointments. It started with the scent. Not my perfume. Mine was lavender and vanilla, old-fashioned and soft. This was sharper, spicier, unfamiliar. At first, I assumed it belonged to a new colleague he'd brushed past, or a handshake from some well-perfumed neighbor. But then it lingered. On his collars, his scarf, the passenger seat of his car. Then came the phone. Walter had never been tech-savvy. For years, I was the one updating his software, troubleshooting spam. But lately, he'd become oddly protective of it. He kept it face down, locked it with a passcode he refused to share for privacy. I'd once caught a glimpse of a message notification before he snatched it away, just a heart emoji, no name. I told myself I was being paranoid, that after 4 decades, people grow apart, not necessarily into betrayal, but into silence. Still, the distance grew. His garden trip stretched later into the evening. He took more phone calls on the porch. When I asked, he'd answer with vague platitudes. Just clearing my head, or too much noise in the house. Noise. That was rich, coming from a man who used to beg me to leave the radio on in the mornings just so the kitchen would hum while we made eggs together. I sat at the kitchen table that night, hands folded, staring into the cold dregs of coffee in my cup. Chloe had played her hand, bold and cruel. But I wasn't ready to call her bluff without knowing how many cards Walter was holding behind his own back. Had he really betrayed me? Or had she lied? The image of Walter, silent and still at the dinner table, returned. There hadn't been shock on his face, only resignation, like a man watching a story unfold he'd read too many times, and that frightened me more than anything. Upstairs, the floor creaked beneath his footsteps. Our bedroom door closed with a soft click. It used to be the sound that signaled safety, routine. Now it felt like a door closing on everything we'd built. I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to massage the tension away, but it was no use. The pain wasn't physical. It was betrayal, or maybe the possibility of it. That's what made it worse, the not knowing. Suspicion is a slow poison. It corrodes your confidence, then your judgment, then your sense of reality. If Walter had truly done this, slept with Chloe, fathered a child with the woman married to our only son, then everything I believed about him, about our marriage, would have to be rewritten. And yet, if he hadn't, and this was Chloe's manipulation, then he was complicit in his silence, in his failure to speak, to defend me, to defend himself. I looked around the kitchen, at the wedding china drying neatly in the rack, the candle wax hardened on the tablecloth, the single tulip centerpiece Ethan had brought earlier wilting in the vase. This room had hosted decades of birthdays, holidays, quiet Wednesday nights. It had been the heart of our family, and now it felt like a crime scene. But I wouldn't fall apart, not yet. I rose slowly, turned off the lights, and made my way upstairs. Walter was already in bed, reading a gardening catalog, his glasses low on his nose. He didn't look up as I entered. "Sleep well," he murmured, flipping a page. "You too," I replied evenly, slipping under the covers beside him. We lay there, inches apart, oceans away. As I stared at the ceiling, I realized that the most dangerous lies are not shouted. They're whispered in silence. And I would find out the truth, even if I had to dig it out of the roots of our marriage myself. The morning after that dinner, I moved through the house like a stranger in my own skin. The walls still held laughter from the night before, but to me, they echoed with betrayal. I sipped my tea in silence and watched as Walter tended the roses through the kitchen window. He was precise, almost reverent with the flowers, far more delicate than he had been with me in months. By the third day, I began to write things down, not feelings, that would unravel me, but facts, behavior, times, faces. I took an old lined notebook and began recording every small anomaly that had grown too loud to ignore. Chloe's unexpected visits, her excuses for needing advice, the way she always arrived when Ethan was at work, never when he was home. Her sudden interest in learning the family traditions, always said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I kept my notes hidden between cookbooks in the pantry, as though my truth needed to be buried with the sugar and flour. That Thursday, the wind carried a trace of perfume through the open kitchen window. I glanced outside and saw Chloe, her blonde hair bouncing, walking straight toward the back garden. Walter was nowhere in sight. Dario, our gardener, was trimming the hedges near the shed. Chloe waved to him, then pulled something from her purse, an envelope. She handed it to him discreetly, but he didn't take it right away. His hands stayed in his pockets, his stance stiff. I watched from behind the curtain, my heart thudding so loudly I thought it might alert them. They spoke for only a few minutes, their voices too low for me to hear, but the tension in their posture told the story. Dario shook his head, and Chloe gestured sharply, her fingers slicing the air. He finally took the envelope, glanced toward the house, then shoved it into his jacket and walked away. Chloe stood there for a moment longer, smoothing her dress, adjusting her expression before heading back toward her car. She didn't knock, didn't come inside, just drove away with the poise of someone who had handled a transaction, not a family visit. I sat down at the kitchen table, notebook open, and wrote, Thursday, 10:15 a.m. Chloe hands envelope to Dario. Argument, duration, approx. 3 minutes. No eye contact with house. What was she paying him for? That evening, I waited until Walter came in from the garden and handed him his tea. He thanked me with a nod, his eyes bloodshot from the wind, or perhaps from avoiding truth. She was here again, I said, voice even. Chloe met Dario by the shed. Walter blinked. Oh? She gave him something, an envelope. He took a long sip of tea, then said, maybe something about the baby? A list? Maybe nursery plans. I tilted my head. Since when do we pay the gardener to consult on nursery themes? His hands tightened on the mug. Walter, what's going on? His jaw clenched. Don't do this. I'm already doing it. He sighed, the weight of decades in that breath. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Because right now it looks like my husband is hiding something from me and my daughter-in-law is paying off the gardener behind our house. His eyes finally met mine. I'm trying to protect Ethan. The words struck like a slap. Protect him from what? But he didn't answer. Walter, I said slowly. Are you telling me you believe her? He looked away. My blood ran cold. You think the baby is yours? No, he said quickly. But it sounded too rehearsed, too defensive. Of course not. Then what is it? I made a mistake, he muttered. But not that mistake, and I can't tell you more. Not yet, just, please, Bess, let it go. He hadn't called me Bess in weeks. It used to sound sweet, a nickname full of memories. Now, it felt like an apology. I rose from the table, gathering our empty plates, and walked them to the sink. You're shutting me out, I said quietly. I'm trying to protect our family. By cutting me out of it? He had no reply. As he went upstairs, the sound of his footsteps fading, I stood alone in our kitchen again, staring at the steam rising from the kettle, wondering when exactly I'd become an outsider in my own home. I turned back to the notebook, flipped to a clean page, wrote in bold strokes, I'm not crazy. They want me silent, but I've seen too much to stay quiet. The next morning, the house was silent, but my mind was anything but. Walter had left early to pick up mulch, a task he'd suddenly found urgent. Ethan was at work, and Chloe, like clockwork, had gone out for prenatal yoga. That left the house to me and my growing list of suspicions. I moved through the hallway with the cautious urgency of someone doing something forbidden but necessary. Judd's old bedroom had been converted into a guest room years ago, but Chloe liked to use it when she napped or wanted quiet time during visits. She kept things there, lotion, scarves, books. It had become her second skin, a private stage for her ongoing performance. I opened the closet slowly, scanning the shelves. Nothing at first. Then, behind a pile of throw pillows, I spotted a zippered file folder, sleek, black, utilitarian. My hands trembled as I pulled it free. Inside were papers, neatly organized, appointment reminders, receipts, insurance forms, and then I saw it. A sealed envelope marked Gene Tech Laboratories. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. My breath caught. Paternity screening panel. Date, 5 months ago, weeks before her pregnancy had been publicly announced. The results were clinical, emotionless, probability of paternity 0% for Ethan Ellison. But the test wasn't for Ethan. It was a general screening, a test for baseline genetics, for establishing potential incompatibility. Why would Chloe do a paternity panel before even confirming a pregnancy? Unless... I kept digging. Behind the folder, a small yellow notepad peeked out. Her handwriting, sharp and flowing, filled the top page. If this goes wrong, switch to Plan Phoenix, clean everything. Do not contact Marcus. Make Walter the fallback. Marcus. That name froze my blood. That was Dario's full name, Marcus Dario Santos, listed on our payroll for over a year. She was planning something, contingency plans, lie upon lie. My stomach twisted. I suddenly felt like I was standing in someone else's house, not my warm, lived-in home, but a stage set, a facade. And I didn't know who the lead actress truly was anymore. I gathered the papers quickly, photographed each one, then returned them to their hiding spot with surgical precision. I closed the door, adjusted the pillows, made sure the room looked untouched. Downstairs, the walls felt like they were pressing in. I sat on the edge of the couch, hands clenched, breath shallow. What was Plan Phoenix? A city? An alias? A reset button? Was she planning to disappear? My thoughts spiraled. The possibilities all pointed to something calculated and dangerous. This wasn't an affair, it was a campaign. And Walter, he was either being used or helping her. I didn't know which possibility frightened me more. The door opened. Footsteps. Chloe. She entered the living room with a soft, "Hi, Martha," dropping her designer tote by the side table. I forced a smile. "How was yoga?" She gave me that polished grin. "Relaxing. You should try it sometime. They do wonders for women our age." Her words were sweet poison designed to sound kind and sting at the same time. "I'm more of a walking person," I replied. "Clears my head." She nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. I sat still, my heart racing, my head full of facts, test results, plans, names. But facts meant nothing when no one believed you. That night, I tried to tell Walter. He sat in his recliner watching the evening news. "Walter," I said, voice low, "I found something in Chloe's things. She had a paternity test and a list of plans, backup plans." He didn't look at me. "You were snooping?" I stared at him. "That's all you have to say?" "I told you," he said, his voice flat. "There are things you don't understand. Let it go." The finality in his tone was worse than denial. It was abandonment. "I'm your wife," I whispered. "You're supposed to trust me." He didn't answer. I went to bed alone. He stayed in the recliner all night. Lying in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and felt something in me shatter. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but slowly, quietly. Like ice cracking beneath the surface of a frozen lake. Not just because Chloe was hiding something. Not just because Walter wouldn't listen. But because no one saw me anymore. No one believed me. And that kind of loneliness, the kind where you're invisible in your own life, is the most painful of all. I used to be the heartbeat of this house. Every birthday cake, every holiday table, every sleepless night beside a sick child, it was me. But lately, I moved through the hallways like a ghost. The laughter at dinner wasn't mine. The plans being made didn't include me. It was as if the story of our family had been rewritten, and I had been edited out, reduced to background. Chloe, meanwhile, had stepped into the spotlight effortlessly. She coordinated everything: doctor appointments, baby shopping, even the repainting of the guest room into a nursery. She presented Ethan with mood boards and fabric swatches like a professional designer. And Ethan, sweet, eager Ethan, couldn't stop smiling. He was going to be a father. That hope blinded him. It wrapped him in a glow of anticipation too bright to notice the shadows just behind him. Walter remained silent. His days were spent in the garden, evenings glued to the television. We spoke in short, practical sentences. "Tea? I'm going out. Mail's here." No more warmth. No more trust. Sometimes I'd catch him watching Chloe, not lustfully, not guiltily, but warily. Like a man who knew the lion was in the house, but hoped if he fed it quietly, it wouldn't bite. One Tuesday morning, I left the house under the guise of picking up dry cleaning, but I wasn't headed for errands. I needed clarity, or at the very least, the illusion of control, so I went to the bank. Our family had used First Liberty for decades. It was familiar territory. I'd always handled our household budget, but I hadn't reviewed our joint accounts since the storm began. I asked for a copy of our latest statements. The teller printed them without question. As I waited, I noticed a familiar figure, 2 counters down. Chloe. She hadn't seen me. She wore sunglasses despite being indoors. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek bun, and she stood close to the banker, speaking with hushed urgency. I moved closer, pretending to check a pamphlet. Her voice was calm but firm. "But I just need to finalize the title change," she said. "He already signed the documents. I just need your notary." Title change? My stomach dropped. The banker nodded and handed her a document. I caught a glimpse of Ethan's signature scrawled at the bottom. She was transferring something into his name. Real estate. A business. She slid another paper across the counter. And please wire the remaining balance to the Phoenix account. There it was. Phoenix. Again. I froze. The banker asked, "Same account as before?" Chloe nodded. "Yes, ending in 3027. The numbers etched themselves into my brain. I wanted to run, to scream, to pull her away from the counter, but I knew better. I stayed calm, watched, waited. She thanked the teller and walked out, not once looking in my direction. I approached the counter after she left. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice low. "That woman, was she wiring money?" The teller hesitated. "I'm not authorized to discuss." "She's transferring funds out of my son's name," I said louder now, "into a Phoenix account. I have a right to know if she's exploiting him." The teller flinched but stayed firm. "Ma'am, unless your name is on the account." Of course it wasn't. I left empty-handed, the bile of helplessness rising in my throat. Outside, I sat on a bench and pulled out my notebook. I wrote, "Tuesday, 11:05 a.m. Chloe wiring money to account ending in 3027. Reference Phoenix. Sign docs in Ethan's name. Unclear what property or value is being moved. She was consolidating, maneuvering. Whatever plan Phoenix was, it wasn't just an escape. It was an extraction. She was draining Ethan's future, and he was too in love with the idea of fatherhood to see it. And Walter, he'd seen something. He must have. But he chose silence. That night, as we sat through another quiet dinner, Chloe beamed while talking about wallpaper for the nursery. Ethan laughed when she mimicked a baby's voice. Walter ate quietly. I nodded, smiled when prompted, and passed the salt, but I was already miles away, replaying that banking conversation, the documents, the number, the coldness in Chloe's voice. I might have been invisible at that table, but I was wide awake now. She was rewriting our legacy, and I was going to make sure that before this was over, she wouldn't be the one holding the pen. The truth, when it comes, never knocks politely. It barrels in, shatters everything you've carefully balanced, and leaves you breathless. The day after the bank, I found Dario trimming the lavender bushes near the side gate. He was quiet, meticulous, always respectful. But lately, he'd been avoiding eye contact, speaking only when spoken to. I'd chalked it up to awkwardness. Now I knew better. "Dario," I said gently, "do you have a minute?" He straightened, brushing dirt from his gloves. "Of course, Mrs. Ellison. And not as your employer," I added, "but as a woman who's confused, lost." His eyes flickered. We sat on the bench by the rose trellis. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I stared at the ground. "You know Chloe better than most," I began. "You've spoken to her, often." He nodded slowly. "She talks a lot when she visits the garden." "About what?" He hesitated. "The baby." I turned toward him. "Is it yours?" His breath caught. That single moment was louder than any confession. "I need to know," I said softly, "not to hurt anyone, but because I feel like I'm living in a house where I no longer exist, like I'm the only one not given a script." Dario's hands trembled slightly. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said finally. "None of it. She said she was unhappy, that Ethan didn't see her, that Walter ignored her, that she needed someone to understand her." He stared off toward the garden, voice low. I was foolish. I believed her. I closed my eyes. "She told me it was a mistake at first," he continued. "Said she didn't know how to fix it, but when she found out she was pregnant, everything changed. She said we had to be smart. Said the baby could protect us both if we played it right." "Protect you?" I asked. "She told me not to tell anyone, not even her husband, that she would shift the narrative, make people believe what they needed to." "And Walter?" "She said she'd make him the cover. Said older men were easier to discredit. Said he wouldn't fight her. He'd stay quiet to protect Ethan." My mouth went dry. "She planned it all. Dario said, shaking his head in disbelief. Every step, the bank transfers, the manipulation, the lies. And Ethan? She knew about his gambling. She encouraged it, then made sure Chloe was the only one who could bail him out. I stood slowly, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. Why are you telling me this now? He looked up at me with eyes full of shame. Because you looked at me like a person. You didn't accuse, you asked. And because I've watched you walk around this place like a ghost. You deserve to know. I nodded, barely holding myself together. She's planning to leave, he added. Soon. She mentioned Phoenix again last week, said the timing had to be perfect. The world tilted again. I thanked him, walked back to the house, and locked the door behind me. The walls felt heavier than ever. Every photo on the shelf, me with Ethan as a boy, Walter at our wedding, felt like relics from someone else's life. She had used me, replaced me, and now she was going to erase me. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. I wasn't just outnumbered. I had been removed, not by force, by silence, by the cleverness of a smile, by the complacency of those who should have known better. The woman I had welcomed into my home, the woman I had trusted with my son, had built a fortress on top of my legacy, and no one else saw it crumbling from within. I picked up my notebook and wrote, Dario, the father, Chloe, the architect, Walter, the shield, Ethan, the pawn, me, the silence between their lies. The house was quiet, too quiet. It was the kind of silence that didn't offer peace, but prickled along the spine like a warning. I moved through it slowly, careful not to disturb the stillness, even though something inside me was ready to scream. I hadn't entered the guest bathroom in days. Chloe had claimed it as her own since she began staying over more frequently. Lotions lined the sink, and soft lavender towels she brought from home replaced my usual beige ones. Even the air smelled like her, expensive, artificial. But that morning, as I wiped the fog off the mirror, something caught my eye. A crumpled envelope lodged between the wastebasket and the wall. It was easy to miss, but not today. I picked it up and turned it over. Gene Tech Laboratories. My pulse quickened. I opened it. Paternity Analysis Report. Mother, Chloe Ellison. Alleged fathers, Ethan Ellison, excluded. Marcus Dario Santos, not excluded, 99.7% probability. The words blurred, but I kept reading, kept breathing, forced myself not to fall apart. It was Dario, not Ethan, not Walter. And Chloe knew. She had known all along. I leaned against the sink, the porcelain cold against my back, the letter trembling in my hands. She had done this deliberately. She wasn't confused. She wasn't scared. She was orchestrating every step. I returned the envelope to my cardigan pocket and left the bathroom. Walter was in his study, pretending to read. I entered without knocking. He looked up, startled. We need to talk. He set the book down slowly. Martha. I held up the envelope. She knew, before she even told you. His eyes locked on the Gene Tech logo. He didn't ask what it was. She lied to you. She lied to Ethan. She used that lie to manipulate all of us. He looked away. How long have you known? I asked. He didn't answer. I stepped closer. How long? He swallowed. Since she told me she was pregnant. I didn't know about Dario then, only that she insisted it wasn't Ethan's. She said it might be mine. And you believed her? I didn't want to, he said softly. But she showed me Ethan's gambling records, the debts, the sites. She said she'd tell him, destroy him if I didn't protect the baby. Pretend. Pretend you seduced your daughter-in-law? He looked up at me, shame painted across every line on his face. I was trying to protect our son. You were trying to protect yourself from the truth. He nodded. Yes. The silence between us thickened. I wanted to yell, throw something, demand why he hadn't come to me. But underneath the fury was grief. Grief for the man I thought I knew, for the partnership I thought we had. She's using all of us, I said, pacing now. She's built this fantasy where we dance to her music. Ethan stays blind, you stay silent, Dario stays scared, and I just disappear. I didn't want that, he said. I thought I could contain it. You can't contain rot, Walter. It spreads. He sat back, defeated. She's planning to leave, I added. Phoenix. I heard it at the bank. She's been wiring money, transferring titles. She's not building a family. She's building an escape plan. He closed his eyes. I want to fix this, he whispered. But I don't know how. We start with the truth, I said. All of it. And this time, we don't keep Ethan in the dark. He deserves to know what's been done to him before it's too late. For the first time in weeks, Walter looked at me. Not with guilt, not with shame, but with something like resolve. I'll help you, he said, whatever it takes. The trap Chloe had set with her lies was airtight, but I had something more powerful now, truth, and I was going to use it. I started cleaning the living room that afternoon, not because it needed it, but because I needed to do something. The rage inside me buzzed like static. Dusting shelves and rearranging vases helped anchor me to the moment. That's when I noticed it. The tiny flicker of a red dot, barely visible beneath the leaves of the jade plant by the bookshelf. I leaned in. Tucked behind a ceramic turtle was a black plastic lens, no larger than a pencil eraser. A camera. A hidden camera. I froze, heart thudding, and reached for it. The wire led down into the soil of the pot, disguised beneath the roots. Carefully, I lifted the plant and followed the line to a discreet micro recorder tucked behind the stand. My hands shook. This wasn't home surveillance. This was surveillance of us, of Walter. I brought the device to my bedroom and plugged it into my laptop. Files appeared instantly, each time-stamped, labeled by date. I clicked on one. There was Walter, pacing the study. Chloe's voice came through, muffled but clear. You'll play your part, Walter, or your son learns everything. The credit cards, the loan sharks, the offshore account. Your choice. My breath caught. Another video. Chloe leaning into Walter's face. Smile, Walter. This is just insurance. You wouldn't want me to lose this baby over stress, would you? It was more than manipulation. It was extortion. And she had documented it all, probably to blackmail Walter if he tried to expose her. I sat back, stunned. She wasn't playing the role of a desperate woman clinging to a mistake. She was building a case against us. I was still staring at the files when I heard the front door open. Footsteps, heels, confident, unhurried, Chloe. I barely had time to close the laptop before she walked in. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Afternoon, Martha, she said smoothly. Enjoying your day? I found your camera, I said coldly. Her smile didn't falter. Oh dear, that was supposed to stay hidden. You recorded my husband. You threatened him. I offered him choices, she corrected. I'm not the villain you're painting me to be. You lied to your husband. You deceived mine. You tricked Dario. What does that make you? She walked closer, her voice low and measured. You think this is about the baby, about lust. It's about survival, Martha. It's about understanding the game before someone else writes your ending. And what about Ethan? Her eyes narrowed. He's weak, emotional. I needed someone solid to build a future for my child. He's your husband, she scoffed. He was a bridge, nothing more. My fists clenched. Careful, she warned, eyes gleaming. You push too hard, and I go public. I've got records of every transfer, every debt Ethan's racked up. Imagine what your country club friends will say when they learn your perfect son's neck-deep in gambling debt. You wouldn't try me. We stood face to face, two women in opposite corners of a battlefield neither of us had chosen, but one of us had created. You think you're protecting your family, she said softly, but all you're doing is digging a hole deeper for all of you. Let it be, Martha. Let me go to Phoenix. Let me raise this child. In return, I'll stay silent. It was blackmail disguised as mercy. I looked at her, so young, so calculating, so absolutely certain of her power, and I felt something shift inside me. I had spent months grieving the family I thought I had, but Chloe hadn't taken it from me. I had given it up, piece by piece, for silence, for peace, for comfort. Not anymore. No, I said clearly. Her expression faltered. I won't be silent. I won't disappear. I won't let the story end with you writing the last word. You don't have the strength. You're right, I said quietly. But I've got something else now. What's that? I met her gaze without flinching. Nothing left to lose. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt alive. The smell of roasted garlic and thyme drifted through the house like a lullaby. The dining table sparkled with polished silverware, folded linen napkins, and the delicate porcelain dinner set that only came out on holidays or heartbreaks. Tonight, it was both. I hadn't prepared a family dinner in weeks, but when I invited them, Walter, Ethan, Chloe, they all came. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the illusion of peace. Or maybe they were just too tired to resist. Chloe arrived last, draped in a cream-colored dress that clung to her like entitlement. She kissed my cheek and said, "Smells wonderful," as though we were two actresses rehearsing lines from an old play neither believed in anymore. Walter looked better than he had in days. Maybe because he knew what was coming. Maybe because, for once, he wasn't the one carrying the whole lie. Ethan, poor Ethan, beamed with naive pride as he helped pour the wine. "Mom, this is incredible. You've really outdone yourself." I smiled and patted his arm. "It's a special night." We made it through salad and soup with small talk. His job, her pregnancy symptoms, Walter's thoughts on trimming the oak tree. All rehearsed, all safe, until the roast was served. Chloe's eyes flickered to Walter's glass, then to mine. Her instincts were sharp. She sensed something, but she was too confident to suspect danger. That was her greatest flaw, believing herself too clever to be caught. "This reminds me of our anniversary dinner," Walter said softly, slicing into his lamb. "Remember, Martha?" I nodded. 30 years ago, you gave me that book on garden herbs." "I still use it," he smiled. "Family traditions," Chloe chimed in. "They're such a comfort." I turned to her, eyes bright. "Yes, and they also reveal so much about who we are, our roots, our history, our genetics." She blinked. Pardon? "Genetics," I repeated, topping off her water. "Isn't it fascinating how traits are passed down? Eye color, dimples, even behavioral patterns." Ethan chuckled. "Mom's on a science kick again." I laughed lightly. "Can't help it. I read this article the other day about how modern DNA tests can map out not just ancestry, but paternity, health risks, even personality tendencies." Chloe's fork paused mid-air. I continued, "Imagine how simple life would be if we could just test everything. No secrets, just facts." "Sounds invasive," Chloe muttered, forcing a smile. "Maybe," I said, "but also clarifying, especially when families are growing." Ethan glanced at her, then at me. "Mom?" "Oh, nothing. Just musing." I took a sip of wine. "You know, my grandfather used to say, 'Truth is like a dandelion. You can try to pull it up, but it always finds its way back through the cracks.'" Walter was silent, but he looked at me then, truly looked, and I saw it. Pride. Chloe's smile grew tighter. "I think some things are better left unknown." "Do you?" I asked, tilting my head, "because I believe some things, when left buried, start to rot." Her eyes darkened, but she stayed composed. "Besides," I added gently, "a baby deserves to know where it came from, don't you think?" Ethan blinked. "What are we talking about?" Chloe's voice was quick. "Just dinner conversation." But I wasn't done. I've been thinking about that, too, I said. How children inherit more than just looks. They inherit consequences, too, secrets, lies, and eventually, truth. The air changed. Walter put down his fork. Chloe leaned back, eyes scanning the room like a chess player realizing she'd missed a checkmate 2 moves ago. I'm sure the baby will have your eyes, I told Ethan sweetly. Unless, of course, there's a recessive gene we don't know about. The silence was electric. She knew. I knew. But Ethan, still innocent, still clinging to the version of the world she'd fed him, only smiled and took another bite. And in that moment, I saw Chloe make a decision. To wait. To gamble. She still believed she held the stronger hand. Let her. The real game was only beginning. The plates were half cleared when I rose from my seat, moving slowly to the sideboard drawer where I had placed the envelope earlier that day. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I had rehearsed this in my mind so many times it felt like muscle memory now. I almost forgot, I said, turning back toward the table. I came across something important last week. Thought we could all take a look, since we're celebrating new life and all. Chloe's eyes narrowed. Martha. I set the manila envelope gently in the center of the table. What's that? Ethan asked. Truth, I said simply. Chloe stood abruptly. You don't want to do this. I already have, I replied. She reached for the envelope, but I beat her to it. With steady fingers, I drew out the single sheet of paper and unfolded it. Walter's eyes darkened. Paternity test, I announced softly. Collected via prenatal sample, 2 possible fathers, 1 excluded, 1 confirmed. I turned to Ethan and handed it to him. He read it. His hands trembled. No, he whispered. Ethan. Chloe's voice wavered. No, he said louder, shaking his head. No, this isn't real. This has to be fake. Read the names, I said gently. Twice tested, signed and sealed. Chloe knew. He looked again. Mother, Chloe Ellison. Alleged father, 1. Ethan Ellison, excluded. Alleged father, 2. Marcus Dario Santos, not excluded. 99.7% probability. Ethan dropped the page as if it had burned him. Chloe, he said, voice barely audible. Tell me this is a mistake. She moved around the table, kneeling beside him. I can explain. Please, just let me explain. Explain what? He said, tears already welling. That you've been lying to me for months? I was scared, she said quickly. I didn't know how to tell you. I was confused at first. Walter, he manipulated me. I blinked. What? Walter said, rising. She told me it was yours, Ethan said, looking at his father. It's not, Walter said firmly. It never was, and I never touched her. She said, she lied, Walter said, his voice firm but calm. She lied to all of us. I played along because she threatened to expose your gambling. Said she'd ruin you. I did it to protect you. Ethan turned to Chloe. You said it was mine. I thought it was, she insisted. At first. Then I didn't want to lose you. I thought if we had time, if the baby looked like you. But it's not mine, he said flatly, and you knew. The silence that followed was unbearable. Chloe stood, her facade crumbling. You don't understand. I did this for us, for our future. That baby still needs a family. No, Ethan said, rising to his feet. You did this for yourself, for money, for power. You used everyone, me, my dad, even Dario. Her face twisted. I was trying to survive. You were trying to control. Walter placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. I should have told you sooner, he said quietly. Ethan nodded slowly, breathing hard, as if trying to keep his body from shattering. Chloe looked around the room. Her empire of deception was gone. Her grip over this family had slipped between her fingers. She was just a woman now. No power, no mask, no audience. Martha, she said suddenly, grasping for anything. You could have talked to me. Woman to woman. I tried, I said calmly. You called me obsolete. You dismissed me from my own family. She looked at Ethan. Please? He didn't move. "I think you should leave," I said. She didn't argue. The sound of her heels echoed through the dining room like a drum beat marking the end of war. When the door finally shut behind her, no one spoke. We just sat there, surrounded by empty plates and the remains of a dinner that would never be forgotten. The morning after the dinner, the house was quieter than it had been in months. No low hum of Chloe's voice floating from the kitchen. No sound of her heels clicking down the hall like punctuation marks on a sentence no one wanted to read. Just the faint chirping of birds beyond the garden window and the scent of fresh coffee I'd brewed out of habit, not necessity. I found the note tucked beneath the ceramic rooster on the counter, the same one Chloe had always complained was hideously vintage. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, tight, almost rehearsed. "Martha, you didn't have to help me, but you did. You didn't have to show me grace, but somehow you still found it in you. I never meant to destroy anything. I just didn't know how else to survive. I was tired of being invisible, tired of being the girl no one believed in. I wanted to become someone, to matter. I thought if I could craft the perfect life, the perfect image, then maybe I could finally feel real. I know what I did was wrong. Not just the lies, but the way I twisted people to fit my needs. Dario will make a good father. He deserves to know the child we made wasn't a mistake. Thank you for not burning me down completely. I'm leaving quietly, as I should have done long ago. Chloe, I read it twice. The first time as a mother, the second time as a woman. No excuses could erase what she'd done. But I understood her more now than I wanted to admit. We've all chased versions of ourselves we thought were more lovable. Some of us just leave more wreckage behind. Later that afternoon, the cab pulled into the driveway. Chloe emerged in jeans and a plain sweater, hair pulled back, face scrubbed of makeup and manipulation. She carried only 2 bags. Dario's sister, Elena, stepped out to greet her, a woman with kind eyes and the same quiet strength her brother had. I had spoken to her the day before. She had agreed to take Chloe in temporarily to help her start over. As Chloe passed by me on the porch, she paused. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You win, Martha." I looked at her evenly. "This was never a game." She nodded, blinking fast, then turned and got into the car without another word. As the vehicle pulled away, Walter came to stand beside me. We watched the dust trail fade into the horizon. "She's gone," he said softly. "For good," I replied. And for the first time, it didn't feel like something lost. It felt like something set free. Later that evening, Walter joined me in the study. He had a folder in his hand, thick, bound with notary stamps along the edge. "I updated the trust," he said quietly. I looked at him, curious. I thought, maybe you'd want to know where things stand, the estate, the house, the investments. "And?" I asked. He hesitated. "I've arranged for a separate fund for the child, Dario's son," and I blinked. "You don't have to. He's still our grandson," Walter interrupted gently. "Even if not by blood. Not mine, not Ethan's. But still, he'll carry the legacy of our name, of our story." He looked at me, and I saw the man I'd loved for over 4 decades, weathered, wounded, still trying to do right. "I don't want him to grow up wondering if he matters." I nodded slowly. "You've thought this through." "It's what you would have done," he said, and somehow that meant more than any apology. Spring returned quietly the following year. The garden that had once held so many secrets now bloomed with peonies, daffodils, and soft lavender. It was Walter's idea to rebuild the trellis, Ethan's hands that hammered each nail into place. This time it wasn't for show, it was for healing. Ethan had changed. Not overnight and not without stumbling. But after Chloe left, something inside him cracked open. He started going to Gamblers Anonymous, attended every meeting, missed none. I never once had to ask. Some evenings he sat at the kitchen table flipping through old baby books. Not Chloe's baby, his, the one he hoped to have someday, honestly this time with someone who saw him for who he was, not what they could manipulate him into being. And that someone came, unexpectedly, gently, in the form of Hannah. She worked at the local library, wore soft cardigans, and read historical novels by the dozen. Her laugh was low and kind, the kind that melted awkward silences and encouraged the truth to come forward. Ethan introduced her over Sunday lunch. She brought a pie. "She made it herself," he said, beaming. "It's just peach," she said, blushing. "It's perfect," I told her. And it was. They married 6 months later in our backyard, simple vows beneath the very oak tree where Chloe once whispered threats. This time, the air held only peace. Walter cried during the ceremony. I did too. But they were the right kind of tears, the kind that follow a storm and wash everything clean. Then one afternoon in early May, a small envelope arrived. No return address, just my name in block letters. Inside was a photo, a baby boy, maybe 6 months old with dark eyes and Dario's solemn expression. His tiny hand was curled into a fist near his cheek. Behind him, a nursery with pale blue walls and shelves filled with stuffed animals. On the back, in Chloe's elegant handwriting, "His name is David. He sleeps through the night and laughs when I sing off-key. Thank you for teaching me what kind of mother I want to be. Thank you for not turning your back when you had every reason to." Chloe, I sat with the photo for a long time, studied it, smiled at it, cried over it. She hadn't asked for forgiveness. But maybe, in her own way, she had found it anyway. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, I stood in the garden with a cup of tea and watched the wind stir through the flowers. Walter was pruning roses nearby. Ethan and Hannah were inside, talking softly over dinner prep. Life had returned. Not exactly as it was, but quieter, truer. There had been no parade, no grand recognition, no headlines celebrating the sacrifices I made or the battles I fought. But that was never the point. I didn't need to be applauded. I didn't need to be remembered as the matriarch who exposed the lies. I only needed to know that I lived with integrity, that I chose dignity when rage would have been easier, that I protected what mattered, even when no one else saw the danger. The world had tried to write me out of my own story, but I wrote myself back in, and that, I thought, as I sipped the last of my tea, was more than enough.